Blog Talk Radio.
Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell.
Hello, William.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Guys and a Bible. This is William Bell. I am unable to hear anything, but I know that Don Preston is on the line. I'm going to be trying to work out whatever problem I'm having with my audio here in just a few minutes. But we thank you for tuning in. Don, are you able to hear me at all?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're coming through my speaker, so I'm going to have to re-rig something here to make this work. But just go ahead, and I'll be on with you shortly.
Okay, very well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us with right here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust, on Two Guys and a Bible. Appreciate you very, very much being with us. Boy, I tell you what, it's been a busy, busy week. I am thrilled to say that I finished my exegetical study of the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15. I produced 315 videos. And so I've begun addressing some different standalone, as it were, topics in response to requests that have been sent to me. This morning, I began a series on the question, is Donald Trump the Antichrist? You know, just recently I posted, and I in my video, I asked people, do you have a topic that you would like for me to cover in my upcoming videos? And the number one request was the Olivet Discourse. By far and away, the number of requests for me to begin a study of the Olivet Discourse outstripped everything else. But as William and I have discussed on this program many, many times, it's so sad to realize how many people live in abject fear that we're living in the last days, that the time of the end is just around the corner, that every rock, every news broadcast is about another sign of the end. It's one of the reasons that we just completed a somewhat lengthy study of the signs of the end. And much to my amazement, even though we've discussed this on this program, even though I produced some videos on it, I had person after person after person contacting me and saying, please, please, please cover the issue. Is Donald Trump the Antichrist? Is he the man of sin? What about the red heifer? Are we in the last days? And I mean, this one particular individual, and there were others who contacted me, of course, but one particular individual just simply told me, I am scared to death about everything that I'm hearing about Donald Trump being the man of sin, about the birth of the red heifer just recently, and on and on. And so it just reinforces, to a great extent, why William and I do what we do. People living in fear of every single thing that happens. When they watch the news, they read the newspapers, they watch these televangelists who assure them, because after all, they are the prophecy experts, that this is it. The end is near. It seems not to register on people that these very same identical prophecy pundits have been saying this for decades, literally decades. I sat right here in my own living room watching Jack Van Impe several years ago, 1999 to be exact about it, and Jack Van Impe said the end will arrive in 1999. Well, I guess we all missed it. And he has done that. Grant Jeffrey, before he passed away. Hal Lindsey, 1980s, countdown to Armageddon. And he told us in the 1980s, the man of sin is alive somewhere in Europe, even today. Well, that was in the 1980s. So here we are almost 40 years later, and the man of sin still has not been revealed. I don't know how old he was supposed to have been in the 1980s, but he was supposed to be alive, and there's not the slightest indication of a man of sin being alive anywhere in the world today. And so what William and I attempt to do on this program is to set your minds at ease, not in any way, shape, form, or fashion, not to be concerned about what the Lord says for our lives, what He has promised to us, our responsibility toward Him, but not to live in fear of what the future holds. Because that's what's happening with so many good people. They're living in fear of today. They're living in fear of tomorrow. And they should not be doing that. The Antichrist is dead. The man of sin is dead, destroyed. He's gone. There is no Armageddon in our future. There is no great tribulation in our future. There's no rebuilt temple in our future. But that, raises the issue that we're covering currently right now, and that is the messianic-temple. But, William, have you made the corrections? Are you back with me?
Yes, I am, and I think I got everything running smoothly now.
Yeah, you sound... Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just saying I was going to comment on those statements you were making about people living in fear, and it should be the very opposite. I struggle trying to get people to see that we should be living in a state of confidence, in a state of victory, in a state of courage, because of what has been accomplished in Christ. And, this is why this message is so very, very important, because it eliminates the paradigm for the kind of fear that people are expressing in regards to the end time. And if they could pick up on the positive side of the message of fulfillment and see that, this is a message of courage, it's a message of victory, it's a message that they have overcome, and it's applying that to your individual life, but also seeing it as a worldview. And it empowers individuals. It empowers the church. And, I struggle daily trying to figure out how can we make this positive message, or how can we get this positive message over across to people so that they can live in that power, live in the strength of that power. This is all about the glory of Christ. It's all about the demonstration and the exercise of His power in the world. And that's why this event that we talk about concerning the destruction of Jerusalem is so very, very important, because, it expresses the power of Christ over Hades, the afterlife. It expresses the power of Christ over the present life and over the future, as you were speaking about, a moment ago. So we have just simply got to keep pushing. And I see success. I see, progress everywhere I turn. People are, either we're neutralizing the futurism in many cases, because some of these guys that you were talking about, and maybe some who are less known, but they are becoming, more fearful of even speaking about these things because they know they don't have any answers for them. And then others are being emboldened to speak about them. So I'm, just really, really interested in seeing how, we can just keep communicating this positive paradigm and mindset so that people are not retreating and running from the influence that we should have in the world, but they are taking up, the charge and moving forward with it and showing that there is a better way and a better perspective on life.
Well, amen to that. And when you talk about seeing progress and continuing to fight the fight every day, William, I think it would be absolutely great if you were to give us a report on the fantastic work that you are doing right now on your radio programs. You folks, I don't think you realize what opportunities have been given to William Bell. He has been invited, free of charge, given free airtime. Well, I think some of the airtime is being underwritten, but all of that said, he was invited by, he'll tell us the exact specifics here momentarily, I'm assuming, but the last that we had talked, 3 separate radio programs have been laid in William's lap to proclaim the message of fulfillment, to proclaim the message of victory, confidence, and assurance that he was telling us about. And I didn't get to watch the program the other day, but I saw a snapshot of you sitting at the mic in the studio, all dressed up to the nines, man. William Bell was in a suit and a tie, sitting at the radio microphone, and he's doing that constantly. So, William, I think you need to share the absolutely fantastic news about the marvelous work that you're engaged in right now and the doors that are being opened to you.
Well, thanks, Don. Let me say, even beginning and before I forget, that without, the support of the Predators Research Institute, some of that wouldn't be taking place. But going back initially to what happened around January of this year, a fellow from the Hattiesburg, Mississippi area, contacted me through Facebook. Of course, he had been listening to the videos on YouTube, watching the videos on YouTube, and listening to other recordings. And so he knew about my work. He knows about your work. And he says, I want to get a radio station started. He said, would you be willing, or radio show started. He said, would you be willing to provide the teaching on covenant eschatology if I were to underwrite the cost of the program? And I sat there, like with dazed eyes and ears, wondering if this were actually true. And he says, yes. He says, I want to do this. And he says, it won't cost you a dime out of your pocket. I want this message taught in this area. And he says, and I like the way you're teaching, and I want you to do the show. And I said, I'll be happy to do it. It was a 30-minute show. And it took him a few months, to get the groundwork all laid, but he worked diligently until he got that squared away. And after, I think starting around January or shortly thereafter, he said, okay, everything is in place. And we started the broadcast. I think the title of that broadcast is the Eternal Word broadcast. So I named it the Eternal Word because I was going to deal with, a lot of subjects on that particular broadcast. Well, it covers Hattiesburg, parts of southern Mississippi. It also covers parts of Alabama and parts of Louisiana. And we started out with one broadcast. Now, there are 3 separate stations. And what they've been doing is they've been playing the broadcast on all 3 of their stations. They have some AM and FM stations, and they're playing them twice on a Sunday, as far as I know. So once on Sunday mornings, I think around 10:30 to 11, and then again in the afternoon from 3:30 to 4 p.m. And I talked to the station manager. I've talked to one of the producers in the station several times, and we've had several rather lengthy conversations about the program. And he told me that people had in that area become very, very frustrated with a lot of the preaching that they heard, and many of them had stopped going to worship because of it. And he, gave me some indication of the kind of preaching that he was talking about. A lot of this showboating and showmanship kind of stuff that people get in the pulpit and do. They're basically entertaining the membership and getting them all excited for the most part, and really not teaching anything. And so he said, we're looking for someone who can, who will teach and who will give people some, a knowledge of the Word of God. He says, that's what I'm all about. And I think he's a preacher too. We haven't discussed that very much, but just listening to him talk, he does some teaching as well. And so after being on for a while, he called me back. We had another conversation, and he said, our station ratings have gone up since you've been on. And he says, I'm enjoying what you're doing. He says, I want to see more of that. He's even asked me to, to come to Hattiesburg. He says, do you ever come here live? I mean, would you ever come here? I said, well, I would. He says, I told him if I got the opportunity, I would come. Of course, that makes it's a little bit hard now to even think about that since I'm doing the live Sunday morning broadcast here. But that's what's been happening with that. And so they've been just tickled pink. As a matter of fact, I'm in the process this week of replenishing my store of material, because what I do for them is I will send them an MP3 file, but I also put them on CDs. They prefer to have them on CDs, and I just kind of ran out. So I've been sending them the MP3 file for the last 2-3 Sundays. And so this week I'm catching up, where I'll be sending them probably 8 to 10 lessons in a series, so that they will be caught up maybe for the rest of the year on all of the CDs. And I just mail them down and date them and everything, and they play them, and I'll send them the audio files as a backup. So it's been working very well from that perspective. But getting the new, broadcast underway, and then with our conference coming up, I just got a little bit overloaded, and I got some other things that are going on. But that's the story of that particular broadcast. And like I said, they are thrilled with it. I'm thrilled with it. I wish I could hear more about what's going on from a local standpoint, but they do report that. And there's another broadcast that comes on, I think, right after me, that I did a couple of lessons, and they thought that I was, shooting at them. I didn't even know that they were on, but it kind of, it kind of struck a nerve with them. And then once I found out that they were following me, I tied, some comments in that addressed them in about 6 or 7 messages that followed thereafter, and even challenged them to a debate. And so I haven't heard from them, and because I told them, I said, I'd give you equal time on the broadcast where you could present and then I would present, and we haven't heard anything from them as far as that goes. And then we had another gentleman from Arizona initially, but I think he might be out of Florida. He was moving at the time, or at least getting ready to move. Now, we started that broadcast, which was going to be on a Monday night, and we did several of those broadcasts, but I think in the move, we kind of lost contact, and so I haven't heard from him since we started doing those. But he was very excited about them as well. You probably heard me talk about Sharp Spear. Well, you met Sharp Spear when we went to Texas, and he was one of the initial people in getting me set up with that gentleman. I probably just need to contact him, but he was contacting me, and he wanted the show to go on. But that one has kind of fallen by the wayside for now. But I believe the opportunity is still open, and I've got enough things to do, so I haven't rushed in getting back involved with it. And then the Sunday morning broadcast, we are just really thrilled about what's happening with that one, and that's the one that's on KWAM. Some of those stations in Mississippi was I shouldn't have even tried. But anyway, I'll get those maybe before the end of the broadcast, and I'll let people know what they are, because I do have them where I can tell you what those station IDs are. But on KWAM in Memphis, and also 107.9, this radio station has a fairly large reach. As a matter of fact, years ago, I used to broadcast on it when it was over on a street called Flicker Street. It was run by a gentleman, I know his first name was George, and a lot of people knew him. It was a fully, Christian radio broadcast. Now it has expanded to all kinds of talk shows. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of the number one talk show stations in the nation, if not the number one. But I know it ranks pretty high. And they have a reach all the way from Memphis to Tupelo, Mississippi, which is about 80 miles south, all of Shelby County area, and then to as far west as Little Rock, Arkansas. Also covers Forest City, which is not quite as far as Little Rock, and then West Memphis as well. But going back a little east toward what's that other town? Going toward St. Louis in Jonesboro. So Jonesboro, Arkansas as well. And so it has a pretty broad reach. Now, here's some of the interesting things that have happened with that broadcast. Of course, it's also on Facebook. So they post, we do it live where you can see the live broadcast on Facebook. They post it on my channel, and they post it on KWAM The Voice. So you can go to either one of those on my personal page or on KWAM The Voice, which is the station's website where the broadcast is there. And they also have it linked to Twitter as well. So it's getting out on, social media. And several of the broadcasts have had over 1,000 views on Facebook. So, it's being shared several times. There are a lot of people who are sharing the broadcast, as well as people who are just tuning in. And, of course, there's a live call-in number where people can call in and ask questions. We haven't gotten too many questions, but we do get comments on Facebook, and so I try to go back and monitor those, find out which of those I can turn into questions, or if some people have questions, we will address those. I've tried to keep a few of the trolls off so that we can make sure that we're, reaching people who really want to study. And here's some of the interesting things that are happening. I was calling our city code office, county code administration office, this about last week, I think it was. And so when I was talking to the guy, I was talking to him about some business that related to, zoning and coding, et cetera. And he said, "Aren't you on WLOK?" I mean, yeah, he said WDIA, which is another local station here. I said, "No." I said, "But I am on KWAM." He says, "I thought I remembered that voice." And so, yeah, so here I am talking to somebody from the, county government, and he tells me immediately that he recognized my voice. Well, while I was doing the broadcast this past Sunday, Leora said 2 ladies called the church, and they had some questions about the Sabbath day. Apparently, they've heard me talk about heaven and earth, et cetera, and what that meant. And I'm sure that I covered Matthew 5, 17, and 18 a little bit as well. So they had some questions on the Sabbath and on the passing of heaven and earth, and even said they would be coming to the conference, which is, just telling me that there is some feedback from people that we're not necessarily hearing from on Facebook, because we can see the people who are interacting with us on Facebook. And fortunately for me now, there's a computer right in front of me. So at first when I got on, a lot of people were commenting. I couldn't see anything they were saying because we use a cell phone, use my cell phone to do the video. So I can't see that far away. But now I have a computer right in front of me, so I can at least see the comments and, we make sure we got that connected. But it's been a good experience so far. I'm enjoying it. The time seems, I was worried at first when we first started. Said, now, how am I going to, do this hour broadcast? Well, man, that hour passes so fast, because they take a few breaks. And, they have a 6-minute opening for national news that they have to do.
Sure.
But nevertheless, by the time they get through with those breaks that form the interim of the show, it's not like much time. As soon as I get a point developed, okay, it's time for a break. But that's a good thing too. And so it's been very good so far. I'm looking forward to expand. I hope that we get to a point where people are more comfortable. I've reiterated the fact that, if there are some local preachers who wanted to come into the station with me and just have a dialogue where we talk about those things, but I haven't had any takers so far. But that's what's going on with the broadcast. Again, that's KWAM 990 in the Memphis, Shelby County, Tupelo area, and as far away as West Memphis and Jonesboro, Arkansas. And it's also on 107.9 FM. And I want to, again, thank Don Preston and the Predators Research Institute, because they were instrumental in helping us to get this off the ground. There were some individuals who also, participated. Christine Live was one of them, my brother Stanley Bell, and a few others who have, contributed, because this one is not free. Neither one of them are free, actually. But people have, pitched in to keep us on there. And so far, we're doing good, and we just hope that people will continue to support the broadcast. The comments that we've gotten on Facebook have been very, very positive, and people are, they say they're learning. There are new people who are responding to the message, because I know that there are people that I haven't recognized, and yet they are responding on Facebook, and I know that there are other people who are listening as well. So that's kind of the story of what's going on with that.
Well, I tell you what, that is just absolutely thrilling. It's gratifying, and of course, Predators Research Institute is always glad to be able to help your ministry in any way. I'm glad and honored to be a very small part of what you're doing there. And I think what we need to do, William, is I need to put you in touch with my webmaster and Alan Morton, and see if he can make arrangements so that when your program is live on Facebook, that it's linked to my Facebook page and broadcast on my Facebook page, and just gets that much more exposure.
Well, great. And I also, as I told you before when we first started, that, I'd like for you to call in one Sunday morning and do some teaching yourself, just call in and share some messages, some information, and, we can dialogue just like we do here, because, I think people would be very, very interested in hearing that. So, you can just pitch in. A couple of other things also that have taken place. And before I forget, let me go ahead and put these other station IDs out for the program in Hattiesburg area. It's WORV and WJMG and WGDQ radio. I'll repeat those. That's WORV as in victory, WJMG, and WGDQ. So those are the stations that we are currently on in the Hattiesburg, Alabama and Louisiana area. And like I said, what I've gotten from them is that the feedback has been very good. Another comment I wanted to make was, and I've shared this with you as well, but this individual has been listening to you. He's been listening to me, and he's a truck driver, but he has a bachelor's degree. He's a licensed teacher. You can't tell it by his appearance, and he's, but he is a very studious person, and he is a Hebrew Israelite, as they call themselves. He has latched on to covenant eschatology, and man, is he doing some teaching in that fellowship, among those guys, and bringing more aboard. As a matter of fact, we had a conversation with the gentleman from Grenada who is living in New York. And he said that, and this all came from that debate that I had with Captain Tazariak of the Hebrew Israelites. He's one of the second people in command. But that's where he learned about it. And he said, after listening to that debate a couple of times, he said, man, this is true. So he's telling people about the kingdom. He's telling them to get out of this self-imposed slavery, that they are in, and their desire to have slaves in the future and going back to Jerusalem, which is nothing but a neo-Zionist type of paradigm that they're following. But he's been doing a very, very good job, and there are people who are paying attention to him, who are listening to him, and we're having more people come from that group to adopt the preterist view. And it's just going to continue to spread because they really don't have any answers. They put out. Some of those who thought that they could. Most of their leaders now refuse to even engage with me. They just won't. And we've even asked them, to do so, but they don't, and so they're just kind of ignoring it. And the rest of them who have tried have found out that it was kind of a futile situation. But they're about 3 or 4. There's one guy out in California. I think he's in the San Francisco area, if I'm not mistaken. So he's out that way, and then you've got this fellow who lives in Tupelo, by the way. And the reason I brought him up is because we've had a conversation about him coming to Memphis, and he's on a driving assignment where he's the local area now, so he's driving like interstate. But after November, he'll be back in the Tupelo area. So I've invited him to come up because I want him to tell his story on the broadcast, and he's willing to do that. He's even willing to come and meet with us at the congregation. So I'm looking forward to that. But that's very good. And by the way, we have a Hebrew Israelite organization, or Israel of God. It might be some branch of them, right around the corner up on Rains Road here in Memphis. So we've sent them invitations to come to the meeting. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on with that.
Oh, that is just awesome. It's so exciting. And it just illustrates what we have said time and time and time again, that the truth truly does march on. The truth truly does liberate people. Jesus' words that were spoken 2,000 years ago keep resonating in the hearts and the lives of men. If you know the truth will set you free. And there are so many people who are learning the truth of God's faithfulness. And to me, that's one of the things, you mentioned a few moments ago, William, about what our message is about the glory of God. And there's no question whatsoever about that. But it's also about the faithfulness of God, which, of course, leads us toward the glory of God. But it is amazing when you correspond with people, when you talk to people, and when it comes to the understanding that Jesus made these predictions, his apostles made these predictions of things to be fulfilled imminently, and they have no answer. And they're apologetic because they don't have answers. They know their preachers don't have answers. Their churches do not have the answers for a failed Jesus. Covenant eschatology is the only view of eschatology that can proclaim, that does proclaim, our God is faithful. He has kept every single one of his promises to bring salvation, to make salvation available to us, to bring us back into fellowship with him. Just recently on Facebook, a former preterist, and I won't mention his name, but a former preterist was talking about covenant eschatology, and it doesn't do this, and it doesn't do that. We were talking about the substitutionary death of Jesus and the reality or the non-reality of the forgiveness of sin. Now, folks, I want you to follow me here very, very, very closely, okay? And we're going to get back to the temple issue, but we're talking here about the power of covenant eschatology. I kept asking this individual, was Jesus' physical death on the cross substitutionary in nature? Well, folks, you have to understand something. The doctrine of the substitutionary death of Christ has been one of the foundations of all of the Christian message for century upon century upon century. This particular individual has, in the past, unequivocally affirmed the substitutionary death of Christ. He has even written in the past stating if Jesus' physical death was substitutionary in nature, if he truly took our place, if he died in our place, then it raises the question, why do we as Christians, those who are ostensibly in the power of that physical substitutionary death, why is it that we still die? His only response was, well, Preston thinks he's got a powerful argument here on the substitutionary death, but we might ask in response, why do Christians still sin? Well, I literally just shook my head when I read that supposed response, and I responded by saying, Jesus did not sin a substitutionary sin. He had no sin. So to ask the question, why do we as Christians still sin if Jesus died a substitutionary death, is a discussion of apples and oranges. They are not even closely related. The question is Jesus' physical death on the cross substitutionary in nature? And by the way, I would point out, I have been asking this question in one Facebook conversation after another, one post after another. I cannot get these individuals like this to answer the question. Now, the second question, and by the way, I'm getting to my point.
That was a great response. Let me just step in. That was a great response. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand, Don Preston is just absolutely the most skillful person that I have read and studied with and talked to in sniffing out these arguments that are so pathetic. And I just hate to say it that way, but that's basically what they boil down to. And showing the illogic of these arguments and how they don't even touch the core of what the arguments are. And he just, a lot of them are just sophistry. And he can really, really dissect them. And it's something that I'm amazed with as I, study him. I think that is his great gift that God has blessed him with, and he does a fantastic job with it.
Well, I appreciate the kind remarks. Let me continue here. I also asked this individual, and I've been asking the question of one individual after another. Now, one individual that I kept asking the question about the substitutionary death of Jesus, he has disappeared off of Facebook for about the last week and a half, ever since I started pressing the questions onto him. He has essentially disappeared. He may be on vacation. I'm not trying to make any real judgment call there, but up until I started asking him and pressing him on these questions, and by the way, I've posted now 5 articles in response to an article that he wrote, saying that his article was devastating against covenant eschatology. He boasted about 2 weeks after he posted his article that no preterist had responded, and that proved that we couldn't respond. Well, I was busy. You were busy. So since he made his boast, I have posted 5 articles in response to his one, and I began posting in June. Okay? June, July, August, September, October. So I have now posted 5 articles. What has he written in response? Well, like I said, he disappeared off of Facebook. He may be on vacation. He may be fishing. I don't know what he's doing. But the last time I posted, I took note of the fact that he had not responded, and that was when I had posted the second or third article, and I said, when can we expect some kind of response to my articles? And his only response at that time was, just be patient. Well, here we are, almost 4 months after I began posting, and he still hasn't responded. But one of the questions that I have been posing to him, to former preterists, to preterists who do not seem to grasp even some of the most fundamental issues of covenant eschatology, even though they call themselves preterists, I have been asking, is the child of God objectively, truly forgiven of sin? There's one guy, he stalks me on Facebook. He claims that Jesus' death on the cross was substitutionary, but he says, I don't even understand what substitutionary means. It doesn't really mean to take the place of. Well, I don't know where he's getting his definition. I don't know where he's getting it or inventing it. But when you say substitution doesn't mean in the place of, then you're simply making things up. You're the one that doesn't know what you're talking about. So I've been asking this question. If it is the case that the wages of sin is physical death, as former preterists are claiming, as some preterists are claiming, if it is the case that the wages of sin is physical death, and if it is the case that the child of God is forgiven of sin, and by grace and through faith, we are continuously cleansed through the blood of Jesus Christ of all unrighteousness, how is it and why is it that the child of God still dies physically? You know, William, I can't seem to get an answer to that question. I mean, if you're going to argue, ladies and gentlemen, that physical death is a direct result of our sin, but if you're going to argue that we are legitimately forgiven of sin, then why do we still die? And look, I'm telling you right now, major world-class scholars down through the ages have struggled with this issue, and they haven't come up with a good answer to it. Now, why have I talked about the substitutionary death of Christ? Why have I talked about forgiveness and whether or not it's objective and real for us today? It is because of this. Jesus Christ was manifested, 1 John chapter 3, verses 5 to 8, to destroy the works of the devil. He came, and he took upon himself the form of flesh and blood, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is the devil. I should say to destroy him who, to release them who all through their lifetime were held in bondage to the subject of the fear of death. So, to proclaim that we're still under the power of Adam's sin and of Adam's death, even though we're children of God, where is the faithfulness of God? Where is the power of God? Where is the grace of God? Where is the mercy of God? And to proclaim that we as children of God are forgiven of our sins, and yet we still experience fully, 100%, the death of Adam. As one former preterist said, we die as a result of Adam's sin and our own. Now, I don't know about you, William, but that strikes me as a two-death curse. In other words, I'm going to die because of Adam's sin. Okay, well, that's physical death, we are told. But then I'm going to die because of my own sin. Oh, wait a minute. Isn't that a double death whammy? Do I have to die twice physically? I mean, this is ridiculous. The views that are put out there in the name of Orthodox Christianity and historical Christianity. This, we are told, is the view of the creeds. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not buying that creedal view. And so it's just astounding at the subtle attacks. Now, is it intended as an attack on the effectiveness of the death of Christ? No. I'm not suggesting that. People who talk about Jesus' death on the cross, and they even say he died a substitutionary death. You know, I've been in my Logos Bible study program over the last good little while as I'm writing this book entitled The Death of Adam and the Life of Christ. And these great scholars, these devoted men, talk about Christ died a substitutionary death. And then they turn right around and say, okay, if he died a substitutionary death, why do we still die? And they struggle with it. They ponder over it. Louis Berkhoff, one of the great theologians of the last, early part of the 20th century, said, and this is a very rough quote. I've got the quote for anyone who wants it. But Louis Berkhoff pondered the question, and he said, if it is a fact that we are forgiven of our, if it is the fact that sin brings physical death, and if it is a fact that we as children of God are truly forgiven of our sin, then it naturally raises the legitimate question, why do Christians die? And he said, this is a perplexing question, and the only solution that we can possibly arrive at is that we must continue to die physically as get this, catch the power of this, as a part of our ongoing sanctification, unquote. And you're going, say what? Sanctification is being set apart for God's purposes. So we're supposed to believe that we are continually being sanctified every single day by continually experiencing the death curse of Adam. Boy, there's sanctification for you. Where's the justification in this process? Being justified, as Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, you were justified. Justified is being made right with God. Well, are we justified or not? If we are justified before God, then that means that which separated us from God, that which alienated us from God, which is our sin, that sin's been taken away. So if that sin has been taken away and I stand before God justified, purified through the blood of Christ, how in the name of reason can good men, educated men, erudite men, sit back and say, well, yeah, we're justified, we're forgiven, we're righteous in the eyes of God, but we got to keep on dying as part of our process of sanctification? I would suggest to you that we're not sanctified at all. At all. If, in fact, our justification and our sanctification means that we are still under the curse of Adam. Being under the curse of Adam means that we're not justified. It means that we are not continually cleansed. And so, back to this issue of the faithfulness of God. Where are the promises of God? I posted in response to this former preterist who said, well, Jesus died. Preston says Jesus died in our place, but we still sin. And again, it's a ridiculous argument. And I said, well, unfortunately, evidently, the God that you serve is completely and totally powerless based upon your own words. Because according to you, even though Jesus died in our place, you admit doesn't keep us from sinning. According to you, every Christian still dies as a result of the sin of Adam. What has Christ done in regard to the death of Adam? Not one thing. According to you, every single Christian will fully experience the wages of sin. According to you, that demands that the Christian is not even forgiven of sin. His sin is not forgiven. Our sin is not continually washed away through the blood of Jesus Christ. Your Jesus is absolutely, totally powerless. The grace of God doesn't reach you or me or any Christian in any sense whatsoever, because the grace of God does not deliver us from death. It does not deliver us from sin. It does not deliver us from Adam. That's your God, but he's not my God. I serve a God who is victorious. I serve a God who has set me free from the law of sin and death, yet you proclaim that we are fully under the power of the law of sin and death. Now tell me, who is proclaiming victory in Jesus Christ? And I simply said, if this is your concept of victory, we are still subject to the death curse of Adam. We are still subject to physical death because of our own sin. If that's your concept of victory, I don't want anything to do with it. No response to that, by the way. But you see, his views are not idiosyncratic. This is the view of evangelical Christianity, folks. Jesus Christ has not delivered us from Adam, has not delivered us from our own sin, because we still fully experience the full curse of sin. Even though we're supposed to be forgiven, even though we're supposed to be living under the power of the grace of God. Well, where is the power of the grace of God if it doesn't deliver us from the sin that brings death? That's a pretty ineffective grace as far as I can see. I'm off of my soapbox. Sorry about that. But,
oh, no problem. I remember, some of those conversations going on, especially when you were talking about being sanctified and justified, etc. Because, that's the whole purpose of the fulfillment of Jesus' parousia, that he came to consummate the state of justification that was implemented through his death, burial, and resurrection, and of course his ascension as well, and the proclamation of the gospel. And that process was consummated at his coming. And so when you talk about his glory and you talk about, sanctification, justification, they all fall together in the same. You were discussing the passage, for example, in, 1 Corinthians 6, where
yes, sir.
They were saying you are sanctified, you're justified in the name of the Lord our God, and you've been washed, etc. And that is something that has already occurred. And so to deny that, as you said, is to deny our sanctification, is to deny our justification. And ultimately, it's to deny the salvation, because it's all a part of the same.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just simply astounded. I literally am at how people can so blithely proclaim, Jesus died for me. We are saved by grace through faith. Well, what are we saved from, folks? Think about it. I mean, I hate to sound repetitious here, but people who proclaim the loudest, we are saved by grace through faith, turn right around and say, no, we're going to die as a result of Adam's sin and our own. The wages of sin is death, and, we are saved by grace through faith, but by George, we're going to die as a result of sin. Woo! And by the way, I would point this out, and for those of you who are listening, those who will be listening on the archives, just the other day, last week I believe it was, I posted an article on my websites entitled Sam Frost and the Substitutionary Death of Jesus, a Theological Can of Worms. I want to recommend that you go and you read that article. William, I don't know if you've ever had the chance to finally read that article or not. I was hoping to have your input into that, but I know you're just so stinking busy. But I posted that article. I posted a link to it on about 6 or 7 different Facebook pages and made sure that Sam Frost was tagged. I must confess here, he posted absolutely devastating critique and response to it. The totality of his response was just a lot of heaping up of words. There you go. That was it. That supposedly refutes, responds, and answers my article on the issues that are posed by Sam Frost's views and the views of, some preterists who say we still die physically as a result of our sin. This has to be dealt with, folks. You know, I've had people have been attacking me mercilessly on Facebook about my views of Jesus on the cross, whether or not he, whether or not he actually shed his blood. Well, I've never denied that he shed his blood. I've never denied that Jesus had to shed his blood. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. And they think I'm playing games when I say that was absolutely necessary. However, I point out that Jesus' physical death was the sign of the greater spiritual reality, his spiritual alienation from the Father. They think I'm depreciating the value of the one by emphasizing the other. I'm not doing any such thing. I'm pointing out that it's the Bible itself that points to Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection as a sign of who he is, and what he was accomplishing. And they just seem incredibly insulted when I point out that Jesus called his own death, burial, and resurrection a sign of something greater. What is that greater reality? That he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And yet these individuals, you'll have to excuse me for the language here, but these individuals are so materialistic. They're so hung up on the physical. They think that the physical is the sum total, the sum reality of what Jesus did on the cross. A few moments before coming on this program, I was attacked once again by one individual who accuses me of being evasive. No, I've answered his questions point blank. What he asked was the shedding of Jesus' blood absolutely essential? I said the shedding of Jesus' blood was absolutely essential. I cited Hebrews 9:22. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sin. And this individual came back and said, Don Preston is playing games. He will not answer my question. Well, excuse me. How much more clearly do I have to answer that question? And yet this same individual, I have asked no less than 5 or 6 times, was the physical death of Jesus on the cross substitutionary in nature? Well, guess what? He won't even answer it. In his attack against me on Facebook just a while ago, or at least I read it just a little while ago, he mentioned the substitutionary death of Jesus. And he says, but Don Preston puts the emphasis on on Jesus' spiritual substitutionary death. Okay. Are you denying Jesus died spiritually? I mean, I cannot believe the number of people that are affirming that Jesus never died spiritually. Period. End of story. They think that's heresy. Well, that's kind of interesting. One individual posted and said the idea that Jesus died a spiritual death is, quote, absolutely ridiculous and heretical, unquote. Well, interestingly enough, in this book that I'm writing, Death of Adam, the Life of Christ, I document from history, from scholarship, that the historical view of the church has been and is Jesus died spiritually. So the historical view of the church in this case is that Jesus died spiritually. It's not the view of those who claim to represent historical, orthodox, historical Christianity, and yet they're taking a view that denies that historical, orthodox view of the church. The irony here is just, I mean, it's really, really deep, but it doesn't seem to bother them at all. But folks, I hope you can see what we're doing here. We are affirming on this program the faithfulness of God, the glory of God. When we talk about the fact that he kept his promises, Jesus said some people who were alive 2,000 years ago would not die until they saw him coming in his kingdom, in his power, in his glory, in judgment of all men. Do we have 2,000-year-old people running around still waiting to see Jesus come? No, we do not. That means Jesus kept his word. And I want you to consider this closing bit of paranesis, of exhortation. Jesus said, do not believe me for my words' sake, believe me for my works' sake. if I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. Well, wait a minute. The works of Jesus were the signs that he did. So the signs are absolutely the essential element for producing faith. Yet we're being told you are depreciating the physical aspect of Jesus. No, I'm not. I am affirming the physical reality and the essential nature of those physical acts and physical events that point us to faith. And without those physical realities, there is no faith. William and I are proclaiming a God and the Son of God who did not fail. He kept his promises. And in that we rejoice, and in that assurance we live. And folks, I want to thank you for joining us tonight on Two Guys in the Bible here on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. Keep joining us every week as William Bell and I keep sharing the absolutely marvelous gospel of Jesus Christ. With that, I'm going to say good night and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.